Hey everyone, I'm glad you could be with me today. I'm Vickie Griffith with Breakthrough, if you don't know that already. And I've invited a good friend of mine, Dominic, Mama Frat, also known as Mama Frat, to share some time with us together to share her expertise. She and I have worked together, have actually done workshops together, and they were very successful. Very important information for us all to know and can answer a lot of the questions you asked me. That's why I have her on. She's a double certified. What's a double certified?
Me too. You've got way too much education for what you need to do, and you've spent a lot of money and a lot of time in school.
All right, I get that. Nutritional coach, so integrative nutritional coach who offers nutritional health coaching as a functional medicine type of perspective. Her concentrations include autoimmune disorder, allergies, sensitivities, gut health, and stress response. Her workshops are educational, empower people to succeed. Her talks as a speaker are inspirational, uplifting. They are a whole lot of fun. She and I spoke together at just recent past. She trains executional, say that word for me, executional advice for
executable advice. Execution is a little different than executable, but they're both require action.
Not the same type of action, I'm sure. So as you can tell, we have a lot of fun together, and I'm sure we'll keep that up during those few minutes that we have together. But she'll also provide with you some tools and techniques and tips, as well as some education about this whole thing about sugar. And it's become a big deal. And everybody's asking me about it, and everybody's fearful of sugar all of a sudden. And what's the deal? I grew up with a sugar bowl on the table. Everyone in my generation did. What's going on?
Yeah, that's a great first question. And you're right, there is a problem, and it's mostly stems from obesity, which has become an epidemic. When we go to a foreign country, you can tell the Americans right off the bat, and it's not because we've opened our mouth or we're wearing, red, white, and blue flags, or it's because we are, as a group, much larger than people in other countries. And
you mean fat?
Yeah, I do.
You're being very correct, but you're very kind. But
that was a PC way of saying it. But they say this is going to be the first generation of kids that are going to grow up sicker than their parents were and die younger than their parents did. This is how big a problem it's become. And there are a lot of reasons. It's like a fork. There are many prongs in the fork. And, we could go through, all of them, from farming practices to the politics behind it and, robust marketing efforts. But the biggest reason is because years ago there was this movement about eating low-fat foods. The belief was that if you ate low-fat foods, you would not get fat. And that, in contrast, if you ate foods high in fat, you would be fat. Unfortunately, when they started marketing and putting low-fat foods out there, they tasted like cardboard. And they weren't very good. So they started putting sugar in them. And when they put more sugar and salt in foods, suddenly they realized, wow, studies started showing that it lights up people's areas of their brain, the right amount of sugar, and it creates that dopamine response in the body, and all of a sudden it's addictive. And now you've got this, how can we get the right balance of sugar in there so it's just sweet enough so that it lights up those centers and you come back for more. It's like grandparents. Here's a tip, not that you want to necessarily do this, but if you're meeting your grandchild for the first time and you want them to feel good around you, the best way, take that pacifier, dip it in some sugar, give it to them. I'm teaching you bad habits. This is what not to do, right? But it does. It's scientifically proven. It lights up that feel-good receptor in the brain. And that, milk has a lot of sugar in it too. And by design, God created our bodies like that so that the babies would fall in love with mama's milk. it's a plus in that side. That's a blessing, right? This is why children latch on and they eat well. But the downside is humans have figured out that with just the right amount of sugar, I can create that same thing in you. I started creating focus groups in order for companies to know, okay, what's the right amount exact recipe to get you addicted. And so we have that problem, and that changed manufacturing. And then manufacturing started coming out with a lot of foods that would addict us, right? Get us to keep coming back for more. And then secondary challenges, when our grandmothers were coming up, they were at home and they would start meal prepping for the meal, 2 hours or however long in advance, and they'd make it from scratch. Well, today, we as mothers are out working. And when we come home, we're doing the best that we can to get the food on the table, and we try to get as much nutrition as possible, but not wear us out. We're already worn out. We're tired, and we still got to do homework with the kids and all those things. So there's a lot of reasons why we've gotten to this place. But the biggest is that there is more sugar in fast foods and boxed foods and low-fat foods and in processed foods in general, because companies have figured out that it lights up those centers in the brain, which causes you to really like their product, which causes you to buy it again and again.
So I've heard you use the word addiction several times, or addictive. And that's really interesting because a lot of my clients will say to me, I'm addicted, but then they'll also say, but I can't be because science tells me it's not an addiction. And so I know you talked a little bit about that with the neurotransmitters and the dopamine. Is there more about that you can add that would help us clarify so that we don't feel so badly about ourselves?
Yeah, yeah. And the first thing I can tell you is don't feel bad. It is truly not your fault, period. Science has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. They do it with rats. They've done it with monkeys. They have shown over and over that sugar is as addictive, while socially more acceptable. It's as addictive as cocaine or any kind of drug that you can fall in love with. Nobody wakes up and say, wow, I want to be addicted to cocaine today. How can I ruin my life? Or I want to be a heroin addict. We don't do that. And willpower does not play into this. You cannot willpower yourself out of this mess. What happens is when we eat sugar, opioids and dopamine are released in the brain. I'm going to kind of make it easy so you can flip the switch and get the light here. You don't need to know how electricity works, but you need to know what's really happening in your brain so that you understand it's not your fault and we need to cut it off at the source. So dopamine is that neurotransmitter that's part of the reward circuit in the brain. So when we go for that item, that sweet drink or anything that creates that insulin spike, that dopamine response, we have a feel good in the brain, and all of a sudden we're happy. My kids used to joke, before I knew all the science behind this, my kids would joke, I would be in this great mood and like somebody gave you sugar, didn't they? And it's true. It lights up the reward centers in our brain. So all of a sudden we start reinforcing that loop because we want to feel good again. It's natural to want to feel good. We all want to feel good. We don't want to, let me feel bad today. So we go for that thing that made us feel good and we come back to it again. And this is why willpower doesn't work. Why we have to cut it off at the source. And it truly is an addiction. While politically more accepted to be addicted, people are less judgmental about somebody being addicted to a dessert. It's just more acceptable, or to sugar than they would be if you sat in front of them and said, well, I'm addicted to cocaine. I need to feel good, but it all lights up the same places in the brain, and it is a scientifically proven fact. And this is why breaking that cycle is so hard. We've seen how hard addiction is when we're looking at people trying to break a drug addiction. It is the same process with sugar in the brain.
It's almost socially acceptable, like you said, to go to rehab for cocaine, but if you went to a retreat because of sugar addiction, excuse me, people would think you're odd.
Yeah. And years from now, 10 years from now, that'll be different, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure it is too. So how would I know that I have this problem with sugar?
You're jonesing for the dessert now. So a good way to know, obviously it's easy if your doctor has said you've got metabolic syndrome or you're diabetic. And by diabetic, I mean type 2, not type 1. Type 2 is self-inflicted pain. Type 1 is the autoimmune version of diabetes. But if you have, for example, if you crave sweets a lot, you have to have a dessert every day. You have a family history of a lot of sweets and you want them, or a family history of diabetes. That means that's what you've been seeing all your life as appropriate behavior or lifestyle. If you have more belly fat, then, I mean, I want to say then you want, but that's not the
We all have that.
Yeah, I don't know a woman who would say, even I know women with completely flat bellies who still say they have too much belly fat. But if you have a predominance of, let's say you're overweight, but the predominance of your overweightness, if that's a word, is right around your belly. That's usually an indicator, and why belly circumference has been such a big part of health awareness. If you get hangry when you don't eat and you miss a meal, that's an indicator that, I mean, we all run on sugar, we all run on glucose.
Right.
But if you have those energy ups and downs throughout the day where you find yourself, oh, I'm tired, let me reach for a cup of coffee and a donut. Those are indicators that there's a hormonal roller coaster occurring. And that's usually, that can be an indicator that there is a sugar response. But another one is being severely hungry throughout the day. I have lots of clients who tell me, gosh, if I don't start eating, I'm fine. But once I eat anything, I'm just ravenous throughout the day. So I get my engines going and then I can't control my appetite. That's probably a good indicator that what they're eating is high in sugar. And so it's creating that hormonal cascade that they cannot control. It's not their fault. They don't know that this is happening. They don't know that what they're eating is the problem. So those are a few examples. Chronic yeast infections for some people means too much sugar in the diet. Those kinds of things.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of little indicators that, I joke. Sometimes I tell people, I help clients holistically because they all have a whole list of issues that they want fixed. But it's true when sometimes, and that's why when we go to conventional doctors, it's so difficult to get help, because we go there and we say, I just don't have any energy. I feel depressed. I'm lethargic. I don't have any desire to go work out after work. I'm exhausted. And he's trying to, in the 15, 16 minutes he has with you, he's, how do I help this person? And they don't have time to go into diet and what your nutrition levels are and what maybe you are deficient in nutritionally. So they just kind of, okay, how can I do the most good? And they give you medicines that are never meant for long-term chronic issues. So anyway.
It's also just taking care of the symptoms.
Yes. They make you, they're trying, and to their, we have a medical system that is for acute care. Great. I walk in with my arm unattached and they'll reattach it for me. That's great. It's a problem. They can fix it. But for chronic issues like diabetes or autoimmune, we don't really have a system that supports getting to the root cause. They're not given enough time. So getting to the root cause, figuring out what my reasons for all those symptoms, and to your point, that's a great way of kind of self-evaluating, because if you're on the path to something bad happening, you can kind of see the pattern after a while. But if you don't know what to look for,
right,
and like you and I can see patterns, but
right,
the average person is just living their life doing the best they can with the information they have.
right, exactly. So how much of your genes, kind of ride into this, especially towards diabetes? So if my grandmother was diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
And so far my mother and I have not been, but yet that means we may have, what is it called? Predisposition to have it?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of clients will say that, I'm diabetic, or I'm on borderline. My doctor says, if I don't change things, then I'm going to be diabetic. And, that's my cross to bear, because, my whole family is diabetic. And it's true. There are genes that do play a role, but it's also true that our environment shapes our genes and determines which genes get turned on or not. And unfortunately, in the majority of diabetes today, it is not the genetic makeup. It's not the gene. It is the behavior that people, and lifestyle. When I say behavior, I mean lifestyle, that people have led for years, and they've been taught from infancy. So if your parents didn't eat the right foods, didn't get the right nutrition, didn't exercise, lived in toxins, were exposed to toxins, didn't manage stress, those are all things that will turn on genes that are environmental, or that will cause you to be diabetic. If you're not getting the right nutrients, you're not eating the right foods, you never exercise. So the majority, what we have found is the majority of people that have diabetes or that are headed down that path, it's called a self-inflicted wound, even though they don't know that they've done it or what they've done, because they didn't know they were headed down that path. They didn't know how to fix it. But it's a matter of lifestyle and not catching and making the appropriate changes early enough.
Well, it's like you mentioned earlier, it's because they don't know. They don't know to do better. And that's the way they grew up. And I, like you, we've talked about this before, the fast food drive-ins, just so the kids could get the toy and shut them up for a little bit. And the sweet toaster pastries in the morning before school. And it's like, oh my gosh, I poisoned my child. But I didn't know. I really didn't know at that time that it made, what a difference it would have made.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I tried here, look how long I have been trying to eat good foods. And when organic came out, before it got cool, I was buying organic food. And yet, I drive my kids through the drive-through to get McDonald's Happy Meals, and so much so that at Christmas time, we decorated the children's tree with all the Happy Meal toys,
I still have boxes of those.
That's what we did. I mean, and part of that was you're working and you're trying to feed the kids, and, you got to drive them to the next, my kids were always, it was swimming, and you're trying to do the best you can. You just you don't know what you don't know until you start learning, and then your eyes are open and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I agree. So what really does happen in the body with all of this sugar? So we've gotten used to it, and we got our kids used to it, and I did the same thing when I was growing up. I was drinking Carnation instant breakfast in the morning before school.
Doing something good, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, why is it making us fat? What is the increase in sugar in food doing to us? All of that.
So when we ingest sugar, so the body, let me back up. So the body can only have a certain amount of sugar in its bloodstream. We live, we operate, everything that we eat, our body turns into glucose, and that's our energy. That's what we run off of.
Mm-hmm.
It's like unleaded gas or something. It's what our vehicle runs off of. But we can't have too much or too little, because both of those are problems. So however you believe that our body was created, whether it's by God or some other universal force, our bodies were made so that if we did intake too much sugar, our body would naturally release a chemical, which is insulin. So that, and there's a whole hormonal cascade that occurs, but I'm kind of oversimplifying it to make it easy so everybody understands. And we release insulin, and insulin then takes that blood sugar out of our bloodstream, and so that we can get back to a normal level in our blood, and it immediately stores it in our fat cells. So whenever we have a large insulin response, we immediately store that as fat, unless we happen to be running away from a lion, and at that moment that we have eaten all the sugar, and then we're burning it off. But which is why part of the stress response, people that are chronically under stress can also have high blood sugar because of the stress response that's occurring. One of those things that occurs under stress is our blood sugars is released so that we have access to energy so we can fight off the lion or run away from it. So essentially, when McDonald's I shouldn't say McDonald's, when fast food locations, their Coca-Colas this was a small, it wasn't as bad as when it's now as small as this size and a big gulp is taller than we are. Yeah. Yeah. So I
can't believe it when I see people carrying those into the convenience stores.
Right. Like, and the funny thing is, right. And I was no different when they first came out. I was like, yeehaw, this is better economically. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, economically? You advance, you start where you can, you do what you can with where you are, and then you advance in life. I've gotten to the point where I don't even drink sodas anymore, but I used to, and I used to drink regular sodas. Then I thought I was doing something good because I drank a diet soda. A whole nother story.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story.
So equate having too much sugar in your blood with immediately storing it as fat. This is why people don't have a chance. They don't even know that that's happening.
Right.
So you don't have a chance. If you go to, let's say you get a hamburger and French fries. Well, the French fries is highly processed, easily digestible, turns into sugar into the body immediately. The body doesn't have to break down. It's not like eating a whole fruit or a whole vegetable that the body has to break down. I got to chew it for a long time. Think about chewing a raw carrot versus a French fry. 3 chews and I've got the French fry mashed up and it's going in my belly. 3 chews with a carrot and I'm not anywhere near ready to swallow it or I'll choke on it, right? So it requires a lot of energy to eat that kind of food, because first I got to break it down, then I swallow it, and my body's got to break it down even further. So there's a lot of energy used, and there's a lot of fiber and protein are 2 things that really slow down an insulin response. So moral of the story is, if we have too much sugar in our bloodstream, it'll immediately turn to fat. So that's kind of what's happening, and that's why it's a vicious cycle, because you think that, well, I'm just going to eat this donut. It's only 50 calories. But it's created such an insulin spike that it's immediately gone to fat storage, which sucks. And then your energy level, because the insulin comes and takes all that blood sugar out of your system, then when that happens, you're like, oh, I have no more energy. Somebody plug me in.
Right, exactly.
And then you're reaching for caloric dense food again. Because now suddenly, I'm exhausted because I've gone, all my insulin's taken all my blood sugar out of my blood. So now I'm reaching for something else. And again, I create the same response. So
So how do we make a difference? What are some high-level tips that we can implement today that could get this process started?
Good
And
question.
I have you can see, it's tea. It's unsweetened tea, just so you know.
My mind's water, so happens to be one of my favorite waters, but it's water. There's so many. I'm thinking that are all like, like here, if I could just, they're on the tip of my tongue. Can you read it?
Got it.
So I think one of the first ones I would say is eat protein at every meal, because protein slows down that insulin response. Protein's also very satisfying to the body, to the hunger, and it'll make you less hungry more often. So you can eat, don't listen to, a great way to start the day with XYZ cereal, because that'll create the sugar spike, which creates insulin spike, which creates the fat storage. So instead, start with some of your steak from last night. Perfectly okay. 4 ounces for a woman, 4 to 6, depending on what your needs are on average. For guys, 6 to 8 ounces of protein, but protein at every meal, including your snacks. Typically what we do in our house is we save, a bite or 2 of the steak or the chicken, whatever protein we had for dinner last night. We'll save a tiny bit, and that's what we take in first before the rest of our breakfast, which for me is typically eggs or the actual other half of the hamburger or, steak or whatever. But always eat protein at every meal, and always eat protein first, because again, it satiates the hunger so that you're less hungry, and it slows down the insulin response so that you're not having that big high up and down.
Can I ask you a question about that? So far you've been talking about animal proteins. How about is there any type of vegetable protein that would work?
Good question. So
I hear athletes were using pea protein for a while.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think you have to see how your body responds to different things, but a lot of people do really, really well with protein shakes. Again, make sure there's not too much sugar in it. 4 grams of sugar is equal to 1 teaspoon of sugar. Which is
that's a lot. That's
it. Yeah, that's already a lot. So no more than that. And the thing is, with a lot of the protein shakes, the sugar is in double digits. And sugar has so many names that if you don't know what to look for in a label, because think of it from the manufacturer's perspective. If you know sugar is bad, you're not going to necessarily call it sugar, but you may call something maltose and honey and rice syrup and all those things are sugar, but you may not know that there's sugar. So of conventional sugar, there may only be this amount, but if you don't know what's in your label, get with somebody who can teach you about labels, because that's huge. Because I have lots of clients who do their absolute best, and then they're getting sabotaged because they don't know how to read a label. And really, like one of my clients, Susan, brought me I probably shouldn't have said her name, brought me a protein shake and said, see, this doesn't have very much sugar in it. And I said, this is a sugar, this is a sugar, this is a sugar, and this is a sugar. She's like, what? So, so a good question. Protein shakes are very viable options, and if you do,
and that's something you help us do, right? Because you have a program that you could help us learn how to read labels.
Oh yeah. There's in the sugar busting program. Yeah.
Okay, and you've got some other tips too, so we'll get back to those. But why don't you share a little bit about the sugar busting program?
Sure.
And how that can work.
So several times a year, I do a Break Up with Sugar online boot camp, where you learn where sugar hides. You learn how to read the food labels. You learn what foods have high versus low glycemic indexes, how we inadvertently self-sabotage and how to prevent those, how to deal with cravings. So anything around having a different relationship to sugar is what you learn in that online boot camp. In fact, I'd kind of be remiss if I didn't say that we have one that starts this Friday.
Awesome.
So if people wanted to sign up for that, and it's very reasonable because as opposed to doing one-on-one coaching, which is very expensive, doing an online program like this is extremely affordable. In fact, people are always telling me it's probably a little, I should charge more, but I would like more people to be able to participate than, for me, the program's already created. So, and you learn stress reduction as well, which is a big factor in your ability to manage life in and of itself without wanting to reach for a carbohydrate. In fact, I do want to talk to you about being a speaker for one of those calls that we have. We have calls once a week throughout, and there's a Facebook group that people participate in. Mm-hmm. And like-minded people like you. So when you need help, oh my God, the board meeting has 18 donuts and I want one. Help me. Tell me something I need to. We can all help each other. So it's a very supportive environment. But we do start Friday, and there's several throughout the year. So you can go to askmamafrat.com. Mama is M-A-M-A, frat, F-R-A-T, like the frat house. Askmamafrat.com and look under workshops. And you can sign up there for the next workshop, or there's even a place on the website that you can just let me know when the next one is, kind of thing, and then you stay on the waiting list. But yeah, so let's go back to tips, because I think
please.
People will love that. So one of the biggest success factors, I think, is meal planning or meal prepping. Some people don't have the time to meal prep, meaning make all your meals. I am at the place now where I can plan all my meals and prep them on a Sunday night. I freeze 3 for the back half of the week, and then I keep the first 3 in the refrigerator for the first half of the week. But we can't always do that. But if you plan, even if you don't prep, if you plan, then you tend to avoid those, because there's always something that comes up. Murphy likes to play in our sandbox, as I call it. And, you're online at the store or waiting at the kids, parent-teacher night, and you're starving because you haven't eaten. And that's when we typically reach for, okay, I'm starving. I'm sorry. I just gotta eat something. And we go through the drive-through and we don't realize how much sugar is, in that food that they want you to be addicted to. So I would say plan ahead. Rotisserie chickens and some vegetables is a great way to have food on hand at all times. I think I have a rotisserie chicken in my refrigerator every week, just because it's fast and easy and I don't have to think about it. You put a couple vegetables. I like broccoli, but other people like, different vegetables. You just put them on the cookie sheet. I stick them in the oven, put olive oil on it, a little bit of salt and pepper, stick it in the oven for 10 minutes. Poof, I'm done. In 10 minutes, I haven't dirtied my stove. Yay. And now I have, rotisserie chicken, which is good, healthy meal, good, healthy protein. And ideally, if you can buy organic meat, but not everybody can do that, and vegetables. And I've eaten nutritious food that will not create the insulin spike. So those would be the first 3, the protein first, protein at every meal, protein first, meal plan, meal prep. Hire a coach. It's a great place. If because we're not taught any of this stuff in school, go to somebody who knows more than you've been afforded. We don't have these classes in school. Our parents don't teach this. They didn't know it. So, when you want to go learn how to play golf, you go to a golf coach, to a golf instructor. So go to, a health instructor. If you emotionally eat, go to a health coach that specifies, it's not me, it's you, that would specialize in helping people manage those emotions or get to the root cause and release them. But that's a big one. I'd say manage stress, because stress is such a big player in how we eat and how often we eat, and creating those hormonal cascades, that if we can prevent some of those stress responses, so breathing techniques, meditation, yoga, tapping, EFT is a great one. Those kinds of things that are tools in your toolbox that you could use in the middle of your day after you just had a conversation with that annoying client or the boss, or, that kind of thing, that fellow employee that drove you crazy, and now you need to release some steam. Obviously going to work out is a great option, but we can't all do that in the middle of the day.
Right.
So you need tools for, the middle of the day, the end of the day. So get those. But managing stress, we all think, but self-care is probably the biggest on the list. Getting the right amount of sleep. I learned all those things the hard way. Trust me.
I know you did. And it took you quite a long time to get out of it. And it was a lot of your own research that finally led you to what you're doing now. And that's why you're passionate, to help people, especially with autoimmune, to help themselves heal and be healthy. And I saw pictures of you just running a marathon, half marathon. What were you guys doing? All I saw was a picture at the end.
Yeah, so this one was just a 5K, but even years ago, I did a lot of triathlons, and then I couldn't do them anymore.
I remember when you couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
I knew
that was a tough time, and all the things that I teach other people is because now hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
It's how you get so smart. Everybody says, wisdom. Yeah, I'm sorry. You get wisdom by doing it all wrong the first time. That's how you know what to do, by knowing what not to do. My kids think I'm so smart, but really, I try to tell them, honey, it's because I made all the mistakes. Learn from my mistakes. But you're right. That's where wisdom comes from.
And I can also be witness to, because I've eaten with Dominique several times and at her home, and I brought home sushi and crashed in about an hour when we were practicing for that workshop, and she brought home a rotisserie chicken and broccoli raw, and I think you broiled it, just like you talked about. So is there any more that you want to add about? I've seen you do the meal prep. I know, I've looked in your refrigerator. I know what you got in there. It's all
looking in my refrigerator.
So that's about as bad as a bathroom cabinet, I know, but you had it open. I was standing there. What can I say? Anything else about, because most people want to know, so what does a health coach eat? So what is your diet like? What is your lifestyle like?
Yeah, so good question. And at different seasons of your life, it's going to be different things, right? That's my first disclaimer, so to speak. It's going to look very different 5 years ago than it does now. 5 years ago, while I was still doing triathlons, I could eat whatever I wanted because, frankly, I worked out every morning before I went to work. So I could eat that donut during work, even back then I was so health conscious. So I was eating all the good foods, but I was also eating the junk foods,
right? Because
I could, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't the bulk of my diet, but my husband is by trade, he's a nurse, but he's an athlete on the weekends and on free time. And he's an American Ninja Warrior. He is probably done, 13 Ironmans, countless marathons, countless obstacle course. And so he can eat, when you do that kind of thing, you have a hard time keeping calories and a hard time staying ahead of being skinny, and which we all wish was a problem, right? And so eating milkshakes every day was not big deal for somebody like that. When you're working out nonstop, you know, having 3 or 4 protein shakes on top of your regular eating, so that's appropriate for that person at that time of their life, and that's what my diet looked like then. Today, because of the last few diagnoses and challenges and defying the odds, I need to manage my weight through what I'm internalizing, what I'm taking in, because I can't do that level of activity anymore. So to your point, it's protein at every meal, even snacks. I will cheat 1 day a week. So 1 day a week, I give myself what I call reckless abandon as approach, because I'm human. I don't want to I feel like I can't sustain. It's no longer. So some people say they're on a diet, and I don't like that word, because I can't. That's not something I can stay on. Right. I want something that is a new habit, a new way of, you know. So all I did was I took out all the sugar, but that's part of how I ended up with the sugar busting program. That's a big piece of it, because I had to figure out, how can I manage my weight, and how can I manage not gaining weight? Because when you're working out several hours every day, you're burning a different amount of calories. Right. You're predominantly muscle than when you're in bed the majority of the day. Right. So, which was my lifestyle, you know, when it first occurred. So, for different people at different times, depending on where they are, I make different suggestions. But to answer your question about my diet, I mean, you know it. We've eaten together. So it's protein at every meal. I stay away from anything white, anything gluten. I don't do bread. I do that for the abandoned day, the cheat day. And I throw everything out that if I have leftover, because it's harder for me to say no when I keep staring at it.
Most of us.
Right. So I will make my husband cookies, and I make them normal because he's not gluten-free. And then I'm not going to touch those. So they do not intrigue me at all, because I get sick if I eat gluten. Mm-hmm. So those are fine. But I 6 days a week, and sometimes it's 7, and then I cheat on the 8th day or something. But right. I allow myself the permission to have some fun 1 day a week. But I eat 2 or 3 meals, no more than that a day. And it is, like I said to you guys, protein first, and always protein. Even if I just want an apple, I'm going to have some protein first, because I don't want to create that insulin spike, even if it's only 2 bites of protein, but it will be protein, like 2 ounces or an ounce or 2, just to slow down that spike. I do eat a lot of nuts. I live with a few now. Sorry, it was funny in my head. When anybody that has kids, we're all nuts to begin with. If not, true. Our kids make us nut. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. So it's you work with nuts, you live with nuts. Anyway.
Yeah.
So nuts are a good high fat. You got to be careful because they're calorically dense, but a couple ounces every day isn't going to hurt anything. And it's all good high fat, but it's good fat. So I stay away from a lot of dairy. I will do it on occasion, but as a rule, personally, I stay away from it. So, I put the rotisserie chicken business. I keep that going really, really well. And then I meal prep most Sundays. I meal prep. And ironically, you have kids and they grow up and you think, I wonder what's sticking, I have 2 and they both meal prep. One religiously, but the other one meal preps too. And I'm like, wow, of all the things, that's pretty
all the things you would have thought of. And I can share too, I know you still like to eat sweet things. I know when I was there at your home, you were like, try this. It was a little chocolate muffin, that you were playing with different types, like stevia, I think is what you were trying. And so you offer those type of recipes that has to pass through you first to this
just quality assurance. I just need to try it, you know, just quality assurance.
Exactly. So it's kind of an all-around type of program. And I really appreciate that you shared all of that about sugar, because it is one of the hot topics for a lot of my clients. They want to know more about it. And I'm not the expert. You know, I'm only sharing you with them so that they can get the most up-to-date, because I know this is what you study too. This is your passion, and you are the expert and always learning about what is coming up, what's the science behind it in the next stage and in the future. So how will they get in touch? You talked about your website, so tell that again. How else can they get in touch with you?
So obviously going to my website, which was mamafrat.com, MAMA frat.com, or if you have a question, there's actually a button there
Great.
that, you know, click on Ask Mama Frat, so you can ask a question and get an answer. Well, maybe you'll get an answer. No, I'm just kidding. Get an answer. I don't know. It might not be the right one. No.
I can give you my opinion.
Yeah, humor is a big part of my lifestyle. I mean, you have to find the fun in every day. You have to manage stress, and one of the ways I do that is by having fun with life. I spent too many years as a corporate executive and flying the straight and narrow, and you've got to fill your happy tank. So humor fills my happy tank. So sometimes I take those liberties and things fly out of my mouth like they just did, which was very funny in my head at the time. But, you know, sometimes I should keep things anyway.
Well, what I appreciate about you, though, the most is that you're able to laugh at yourself. And I think that's something that most of us have put aside. And so that's a whole nother episode that we need to do together about humor and laughing at ourselves and how that changes the stress response. But until then, how do they get in touch with you? mamafrat.com.
Yeah.
And click the question button. And there's also other ways on the website.
Yeah, so you can stay in touch there's lots of opportunities. There's recipe book on there. There's how to deal with autoimmune ebook. There's lots of opportunities. If you're going gluten-free, there's a gluten-free resource on there. So there's a lot of resources on the site for you to check out. I'm also on YouTube, so you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all those things, all those means. And then, of course, my email is askmamafrat@gmail.com. Of course, you can always do it through the website too, but.
Right. Great.
Yeah, so there's all those ways to, and definitely, you know, take action now and sign up for the online boot camp, because it starts in a few days. It starts Friday, and there's nothing more rewarding than feeling good about yourself and having accomplished something and knowing the science behind it, and that it's not your fault. Okay, you are where you are. What do we do from here, and how do we make the appropriate changes that stick, that's sustainable? That's the big key.
Right, exactly. Well, thanks so much for sharing all this today, and give her a holler. She'd love to help you out.
Please, thanks.
You're welcome.